Hello everyone, welcome to my new Topical Ramble video. It's been a little while since I've done one, and I know I did say that I wasn't going to do as many of these as before, and well, I'm not, but I was always going to do them as and when I had something to say, when I had something that was worth talking about. And in this instance, yeah, I think I have. I watched a video from Dean from Escape to Gaming today, and wanted to make a video response as well as talk about E3 and the hype that comes out of E3 as well. I think we're a safe distance away from E3 to be able to talk about that and the hype and the after effects and so on. But first of all, wanted to do a VR response to Dean in his video that he's just put up, where he talks about reboots and remasters and backwards compatibility and people's attitudes towards that. And I think he made a lot of very good points in his video. A lot of the points he made were absolutely on the money. They were spot on. I think when it's interesting to me that whenever an announcement is made of a reboot or a remaster or a HD collection or whatever, you get a sizable portion of people get really excited, and then a number of people, they tend to get pretty annoyed by it. They use a lot of rhetoric like, this is not good for games, this is means that there's fewer new games coming out and so on. And I I think it's difficult to gauge whether they're right with that, to be honest with you. I've not ever heard of a case, and I might be wrong here, feel free to say that I'm wrong in the comments section below. But I can't think of an instance where a AAA game was cancelled in favour of releasing a HD or remastered or Game of the Year collection of a game by a publisher. I can't think of any examples of where that's been the case. And you might argue that, well, the games don't get greenlit, that they never make it out of this sort of, whatever they call it, brainstorming sessions where they come up with new ideas for games. But when you look at when you ever get one of these remastered games and the credits roll at the end, it's always apparent to me that there is a smaller team of people that work exclusively on the remastered version of the game. And a lot of these people don't tend to be those who would be associated with the development of the major AAA games at that company or that publisher. So I think what tends to happen, and again I could be wrong, I'm just going off my own experiences and things that what I've seen with regards to the concern that it's at the expense of new games. I don't tend to agree with that. I think that they employ game developers who come in and they either take a sizable burden of the work off the main team, or they handle it all themselves. And you do tend to see that there's a different developer that's worked on the game. That won't be, they'll have the main development team obviously who created the original game, but then you'll see like another developer's name will appear who had nothing to do with the original game, and they're the development team that's responsible solely for making that remastered game or remastered collection of games. And they tend to be a number of teams that specialise in that. And so I don't think you can I don't think you can honestly say it's had that much of a negative impact. The collapse of the middle market during the last console generation is the reason why you don't see as many new games coming out. When I say new games, I mean new and fresh IP coming out, because the middle market collapsed. That's what's caused that. It's not HD collections or remasters that's caused that. That was a collapse in the market that saw a lot of publishers and developers disappear off the landscape altogether. So I think that we're kind of feeling the effects more now because that middle market contracted severely during the last generation, and we've really gone into a whole new console generation without a booming, thriving mid-market. We either have the low-end games, and indie games, and I don't mean that in a derogatory manner. I don't mean indie games are low-end games. I mean you have the low-end retail games, the budget retail games, should I say, and you have indie games, and then you have the big AAA games, and there's that mid-market area that used to be quite thriving has all but disappeared. It's contracted severely in the last 10 years, and that's why games that you get like Singularity, for example, is a classic case in point. You don't see games like that coming out because those are like mid-budget games, and nobody commits to that anymore. Nobody commits to it because it's like a right down the middle thing. It's neither a massive budget or a low budget, and therefore massive budget games will have all the resources pumped after it. Low budget is low risk. Mid-market, mid-budget games, there's a risk you can lose on that and lose a lot of money. If you invest a lot in those projects, that's where you get the drain, and it's why a lot of those mid-sized publishers disappeared as well and were hoovered up. Their properties were hoovered up by the higher end of the market. So I think to say that reboots and remasters have stymied the variety and release of games, I think is focusing the attention in the wrong direction. I think you have to go back further and look at the collapse of that mid-market that happened during the last 10 years as to why we've not got that going on. But with actually to those reboots and remasters themselves, and why I think they're a great idea, and I'll give you a few examples of it from my own personal experience, I think it also offers an opportunity for people who may have missed the game the first time round to get hold of the game. I think it gives people the opportunity who may have not had the console that time round to be able to play these legendary and outstanding and highly regarded games. I always go back to something that Stan Lee said about comic books, and he said that every new comic book that comes out is somebody's first comic, and that's something that's really important. It was how he wrote his comic books. It was how he approached it. You've got to approach things as if it's somebody's new. Everything is somebody's first experience. Not all of us, us more older farts out here can remember this from pretty much the beginning. We were kind of there when all of this kicked off in the late 70s and early 80s. But there's a lot of people that have grown up, and it's their new console. There are a lot of people that were born in the last 10 years where PlayStation 4 and Xbox One is their very first games console. And they're getting access now to games that were released a few years ago. Alright, some of them are only 2 or 3 years ago, but the point is they're getting access to games that they wouldn't have been able to get access to before because they never had the console, or they never had the console that game came out on. And the examples I'll give you is that's one of the things that Sony said when they released The Last of Us on the PS4. They said, well, look, we know that there's a whole new raft of people that have come in that didn't own a Sony console before, and so we want to give these people the opportunity to play one of the most outstanding games in our catalogue. And you can't really blame them for that. I think that's a terrific idea. I certainly wish that games like the original Quake on the PC and Road Rash and Desert Strike and games like that were being re-released and remade today, especially Quake. By God, id Software, get your shit together. Bethesda, get your shit together. That game was one of the seminal classics alongside Doom. and yet it has never made an appearance, as far as I'm concerned, on a console in the last 10 years. In fact, the last time I can remember Quake making an appearance was on the Sega Saturn and the N64, outside of the PC. Now, I might be wrong, but I can't think of any other time it's come out. It's certainly not been on the Xbox 360, Xbox, PlayStation 2, GameCube, Wii, PS3, PS4, Xbox One. I think I said Xbox 360. But, and that's insane to me. You're talking about one of the best first-person shooters to come out there, and also has one of the most bitching-ass tracks ever, with Trent Reznor's 9 Inch Nails blasting away on it. But yeah, I mean, it highlights to me that there is a need, there is a market, there is a place for these things. And just because, time, the length of time a game's out is kind of nebulous. I think there is a market for it, and it's proof that. That's why these things keep happening. That's why these games keep getting made. These reissues keep happening, because there is a market for it. People out there do want to get this stuff. So I don't think it's a problem. At the end of the day, you don't have to buy it. And I don't think it's a rip-off. If you've owned the game on the PS3 and you've played it to death and you've had the DLC, then what's the problem? Don't buy it again if you don't want it. But if you really liked it, and you've got an opportunity then to play the game in 1080p and 60 frames per second with enhanced graphics and all of the DLC, what's wrong with that? There's not a problem, is there, really, if you think about it? But, it is what it is at the end of the day, as the saying goes. And, I think people do like to get upset about things sometimes, maybe for the sake of it. I don't know. I just don't think there's a problem. And then there's a lot of good things that can come out of these remasters. And as I say, I'm looking forward, going on to my personal experiences. First of all, there was The Last of Us. Now, I borrowed that off somebody in my family when I had it on the PS3, and I ploughed through that game, and it was great. I enjoyed it. But I ploughed through it so I could give it them back as quickly as possible. So when I found out that the game was coming out on the PS4 with DLC included, and also at 1080p and 60 frames per second, I was right out there, day one, launch day, out of the shop, got home, installed it, and the difference was really notable. It was much smoother, the graphics looked better, and I was able to take my time and go through the game and enjoy the DLC. And it still ranks up there as one of my favourite games. I think it's a fantastic game, and I don't think, to me, there isn't a problem with that. Okay, I'd already played it, I went back and I enjoyed it even more the second time round. Now, I didn't have to buy it. I'd experienced it, I played it, I didn't have to buy it, but I chose to, and I don't regret it. The second game I want to talk about, and this one is perhaps more significant, is the recent Dead Island collection that's come out on Xbox One and PlayStation 4, and probably on PC as well. Now, I had Dead Island on the PS3, and try as I might to get into that game, I couldn't get into it. There was performance issues, there was glitches, it just didn't play right, the controls felt all weird and messed up. And I liked the concept, and I really tried to get into it, but I couldn't, because I was constantly fighting these technical issues and gameplay issues, and in the end I gave up. I never even got off the beach part of the game. I ended up writing it off as a bad job and shelved it. And other games come out and I never ended up going back to it, and I was always sad about that, because I like the idea, I like the concept of the game. So I ended up getting, when they announced that they were doing the remastered enhanced version, I ended up getting it on the Xbox One. And the reasons I got it on Xbox One and not PS4 was just simply because the Xbox One had all the content on the disc, whereas for some reason the PS4 had Riptide on download only, for some stupid excuse that they came out with that was not even a valid excuse, but never mind. And I really enjoyed it. I've got so much further in the game. I'm so much farther along in the game because of the fact that it's an enhanced version. So a game that I liked but had to give up on because I just didn't think it was technically very good. Suddenly now I'm back playing that game with enhanced graphics, better gameplay, with all of the content, with an extra game and a little arcadey type game that's come with it. And I'm enjoying it. I'm getting to enjoy a game that I thought, that's it, what a shame, what a wasted opportunity. So, yeah, I mean, there are those advantages to it when you can play a better version of a game that doesn't suffer from the same technical limitations. And another example is the Skyrim remaster. When they announced that, I was so excited. Before E3, I kept praying that they'd announced that they were going to do a remaster of Skyrim because I love that game and I have it on the Xbox 360. But again, it's another game that I've just been besieged by technical problems with it, centered largely around the game freezing because it's running out of RAM due to the fact that the way that the game's coded, that all items that you find in the world remain where you leave them. So unless you put them into storage crates or sell them, if they're lying around on the ground, the console has to remember where those items are, and eventually the further you get into the game, the more it has to remember. It starts to struggle, and in some areas and in some cases it will crash just due to the fact that it doesn't have the resources to run the game. And the only solution that I've been able to come across when I've trawled the forums continuously about this was restarting the game and making sure that you don't leave items lying around. That's not a fix for me because I've got hundreds of hours, probably just over 100 hours in that game. I'm not restarting it. I mean, I really like that game, but I'm not restarting it and then risking the same thing happening again. I mean, it's a nebulous fix. I mean, the mod community did fix that problem on the PC, but there was no fix ever issued for the Xbox 360 version, as far as I know. And I have the latest update on there, and I've deleted the updates and installed them. I've installed it to a hard drive. I have tried everything. All of the tricks that they mentioned on the site I've tried, and it's made no difference. And the last resort was restart your game, and I'm not prepared to do that if it's going to do the same thing again. Is there a chance that the remaster can do it? There's always a chance, but I seriously doubt it. I mean, the new consoles have much more RAM than the last generation of consoles did, and I know that it's got enhanced graphics, but I think it would be really galactically stupid if they launched the game on the new generation of consoles that had legacy issues that plagued the last gen. I mean, on the PS3, it was notorious for being broken. I don't know if they ever actually got it to a state where they could even get the DLC out for it. I mean, that was one issue. They actually had to suspend launching the DLC on the PS3 version because they couldn't actually get the main game to work, and the DLC would have just put even more to bear on the hardware, and it couldn't cope with what was already there. So I don't know if they ever even managed to fix that, but that was something that was dragging on for an age. So there are many benefits to it, and the thing is, if it's something that you get really upset about and you don't like the idea of it, then you don't have to buy it. And that's as simple as that. There is no rule that says that you have to buy any of these games. So I don't really see that there's much in the way of a problem to it. My experiences of them have been more positive than negative. In fact, I've not had a negative experience in buying any of these collections, because by and large I've only ever bought the ones that I've really wanted. I've never felt compelled to buy anything that I wasn't 100% certain that I wanted in the first place. So I think that pretty much covers the issue of the reboots and remasters. So just to touch briefly on the backwards compatibility, I think when you look at the backwards compatibility, there's really two ways of looking at it as far as I'm concerned. The first way of looking at backwards compatibility is it's a great thing to have if, like me, you have limited space, and it enables you to, get out with the old console and play the games on the new one. You can play your older games and your newer games on one console. I mean, in all honesty, there's no drawbacks to that, to be perfectly frank. That's in an ideal world. But it's not a deal breaker for me if a console doesn't. I got on board the PlayStation 4 train on launch day knowing that my PS3, PS2 and PS1 games wouldn't work. I didn't stop playing on the PS3 because when they took away the backwards compatibility for PS2 games. I still have a PS2, I still have a PS3 and a PS4, and I have an Xbox One and Xbox 360. Now, a PS2 is mothballed essentially. That's like stored away because I don't have the space to have it out. But it would never stop me buying a console if they say, look, the next gen aren't backwardly compatible. I'm not about to cut off my nose to spite my face. I think what I tend to do is keep the older console until I've played through all of the games that I want to play through on there, and then I have to make the tough decision. Are there games that I can't live without? And in that case, keep the console. If there are games that ultimately you can live without, well then get rid. It's as simple as that. But I think it's neat what Microsoft have done with the Xbox One in bringing backwards compatibility to it, because there are examples where the games are actually running better on the Xbox One than they did on the 360. Apparently, as I make this video, Red Dead Redemption's come out, and the early feedback is it is better performing on the Xbox One, which one would expect. But sometimes with backwards compatibility, it's not as simple and as straightforward as more power means better performance, because you're talking to different chipsets, and sometimes depending on who's responsible for making it compatible, there can be issues. That was notable with the Xbox 360 and certain Xbox One games that weren't strictly backwardsly compatible because they would crash. They had performance issues, they had bizarre issues sometimes where the sound wouldn't work, or controller issues and what have you. So I like what they're doing is that they're taking their time and they're making sure that the games come out, they work. I think that's important. But I like backwards compatibility, but I would never treat it as a deal breaker for me not buying a games console. I think it's a bonus, and that's how it should be looked at. If you think back in the day, it wasn't that big a deal. A lot of people in the past, when they got a new console, when people went from the Mega Drive to the PlayStation, there was no backwards compatibility. Even if they went from the Super Nintendo to PlayStation, again, there was no backwards compatibility. There was no backwards compatibility between the Saturn and the Mega Drive. There was no backwards compatibility between the N64 and Super Nintendo that I was aware of. It was a clean break, and we were all pretty much used to that. Backwards compatibility only really became a thing when people started to do these third-party converters, like the Master System and Mega Drive converters, and the Super Nintendo NES. Was there an NES converter? I think there was, wasn't there? I'm not too sure now. But yeah, when they started to do stuff like that, but it wasn't really mass market at the time. It was more of a specialist thing. But it only really started to come around when the PlayStation 2 come out, and you could play PlayStation games on there, and when you could play GameCube games on the Wii and certain Xbox original games on the Xbox 360, and then it kind of snowballs from there. People get a degree of expectancy which they shouldn't have. So yeah, that's that. So as I said, I was going to touch on E3 and hype to finish up the video. Now, I'm not going to talk about the individual things at E3, but what I always notice when I'm watching E3, and you have Twitter open to gauge people's reactions, and you're looking at, what people think about things, you see a lot of people who get carried away by what they see, and then you get a like number of people who get very, very cynical about what they see. It's always interesting. E3 is an interesting time to gauge the general mood with gamers. Now, we all know that there's been many infamous cases of where games have been demoed at E3 and then they've actually turned out to be nothing like the games that end up at retail. Watch Dogs, Aliens Colonial Marines, to name but two. Now, this happens an awful lot. And I think it happens an awful lot because I sometimes think that people don't really understand what they're looking at when a game is demoed. Not when you're playing in the demo pods, but when a game is up on the big screen at E3 and being demoed. It's a vertical slice of a game that's running on a PC, a power PC. Power PC? Powerful PC. And it's not the full game. It's a demo. So a lot of the resources are being of very powerful computers are being channeled into a narrow band, which means that all of the other stuff that goes on with a game, they don't have to be concerned about. The other functionality that takes up system resources while a game is running doesn't apply. So they can really hammer home what this game could look like and what they're targeting, what they're trying to achieve. But invariably that's not what you're going to get. Here's what I say. When you walk into a fast food restaurant, say McDonald's or Burger King, and you see the burger that's on the wall, like the Big Mac or the Whopper, and you look at it and you think, wow, that looks fantastic. Oh, look at the Big Tasty, it looks amazing. And you get it. And when you take it out of the box, it looks like somebody's run it over with a truck. It's the same thing, but it visually doesn't look the same as the burger. And that's because it's an advertisement. It's not a representation of what it is. It's advertising it what, in an ideal world, it would look like. I mean, they'll taste the same, pretty much. But they just don't look as good, because in practicality, it's not possible. Okay, it would take them a phenomenal amount of time to achieve every single Big Mac looking as good as it does on the thing behind you. You'd be waiting an awful long time for it. Okay, it would defeat the objective of being fast food. And it's the same with games. It's to show you what type of game it's going to be, how it can play. If you focus primarily on the graphics, you're going to be disappointed. If you look at it more objectively and look at it as something, well, okay, this is what the game's going to play like, then you're less likely to be disappointed by it. You just got to learn to take these games with a pinch of salt. You've got to learn to take it all with a pinch of salt, because it's one big advertisement. That's what it is. They're advertising their game, and so they're going to make it look as good as possible. E3 is all about selling games and hardware. That's what it is. Nothing more. And if you watch E3 with that in mind, you can enjoy it a lot more. You can have a laugh at the ridiculousness of it all, the self-indulgent nature of it all, but don't look at it as being anything like being representative of the game that you're going to get. Just look at it as an advert and take it from there. Thanks for watching, guys, and stay tuned to my channel for more to come.